Hey friends, welcome back to day number 17. I hope you all are doing well and safe. Today we are going to cover one more rule from the payroll building block, and I'm pretty excited as we are pretty much close to the actual building block, and in just few more sessions we will be actually covering the final payroll, and that will be the final part of these 20 days of Kronos configuration tutorial. If you haven't had a chance to actually go through the previous days of or 16 days of video tutorial that we had, I will put the playlist link in the description. And if you want to continue learning on Kronos and other modules, please make sure you subscribe and hit that bell button so that you don't miss out on the any of the updates. With that note, let's go right into the pay policies and see what all we have covered so far. So we've covered pretty much 70% more than that already. As you can see, it's a pretty lengthy building block, and we've covered almost everything. And in the last session, day 16, we've seen the fixed rules. And today we're going to go actually into the punch interpretation rules. So that is what we are going to cover, and this is one of the important building blocks. And most of you who are working with your clients or customers who uses a device or physical clocks, then you might have noticed that punch interpretation rule is almost uh, required in all your projects. So it's a mandatory building block that you will definitely have to create in each of your projects or implementation projects. So that is something that we are going to cover today. And if you're wondering something about the processing order, well, the processing order is not much required because the application itself has a processing order. But to give you a quick review of what processing order does, well, processing order are used to specify how the system counts accumulated hour types. Well, as I said at the beginning, um, it is only required if certain hour types, either always or never, help the employee receive, um, especially the weekly overtimes. So most of the time, processing order are used for processing certain overtimes last. However, if you do not want to do any of such things, you do not want to process anything, especially the overtime at the end, then you do not have to do this because the system by default, as you can see, by default, it has a chronological order of processing the hour types. So technically, you do not have to create a processing order. So I'm not getting into this one. But if you have any questions on this, you can put them down in the comment section, and I will be more than happy to get back to you if you have any questions on the processing order. Because the other reason that we not much use processing order, because we also have the combination rule and the pay code itself, where we can do some settings which can serve the purpose. Okay, in the pay code definition as well as in the combination rule, we have some settings which we can use if we have to use some of the features that is required. Anyway, so let's go right into our topic, which is for today, which is punch interpretation rule. Pretty interesting topic. And let's go right into it. I'm going to click on new. So here we are in the punch interpretation rule. When you come to this section, the first thing that you will note is that the punch restriction, there is a drop down which has two options. The default one is full, and if you click on the drop down, it will say simple. So simple is actually simple because there is not much, or rather, I would not say not much, but I would rather say the most required things that you would need mostly are here. These are the things that you might need to set up if you are setting up the punch interpretation rule. So you can use simple It's a straightforward one. I will explain each of these things, but I will go with the full. By default, most people use this, and it also includes all these fields. So with one, we can cover both. Okay. So as you can see, it has more fields, but again, we are not going to use, we don't use this, all these fields. So you don't have to worry about all the fields that you see on the screen. I will tell you which fields are the most commonly used ones and how to go about setting them up and what are the usage of those fields, the most commonly used ones. But before we get into that, why do we need to use punch interpretation rule? What is the purpose of using punch interpretation rule? Well, you might have um, noticed that I have stressed or emphasized on the word interpretation. Okay, so there you get a some kind of a clue what this rule does. It kind of interprets the actual punch made by the user. And where does the punch happen? It happens at the device, physical device. So remember, friends, if you punch interpretation rule is mostly used if your clients are using clocks, the physical clock, in-touch clock, or 4500 clock. So if they are using clock, and if the employee goes to the clock and they swipes the card or puts the fingerprint or biometric finger scan, at that point in time, this action will happen, whatever we're going to set it up. Okay. So more often than not, if you are not using clocks, then you don't have to worry about this. In fact, you don't have to create this any new punch interpretation rule as well. Don't worry about creating this. But if you are having clocks, then yes, by default, you need to have this setup and attached to your payroll as well. Having said that, some of the hourly employees at times they use timestamp, so this may come into picture when you're using timestamp as well. So keep a note on that too. Okay, so that is the purpose of using punch interpretation rule, or rather, when we use it, if you're using clocks, then you will use it. Now let's go into some of the sections of this punch interpretation rule, and I will explain you why they are used and what is the field default values that we give. Now, most of the values that you see here is something which is good enough for you to use them, because this is a default setting. As you might have seen, when I click on new, you might have seen that most of the fields are already pre-populated, almost all the fields, and you can actually use this as is. Yes, I have done that in multiple of my own implementation projects, and I have recommended that to my trainees as well. So you could do that, but there could be some minor changes that you might have to do based on how your client requirements. Maybe I will let you know that too. So the first thing is the schedule start, and there are two things that you will have to think about here. One is the early start margin and then the late start margin. So what this two does is, let me explain you with an example. Let's assume that your client employees, they work from 9 in the morning till 6 p.m. So if you're scheduled to come at 9, so your scheduled start time is 9 a.m., right? If you have a setup which says early start margin, so early start, that means if your start time is 9, and here I mentioned 4 hours in the early start, that means 4 hours from your scheduled start time. So your scheduled start time is 9 a.m. So 4 hours from your scheduled start time will be 5 a.m., right? So 5 a.m. early start margin is, you can say, 5 a.m. What that means is, if your employee who is scheduled to come at 9 in the morning, for some reason, I do not know, if for some reason he comes 4 hours early, goes to the clock and puts his card, proximity card at the clock, the clock will read the batch, and it will say punch in. Okay, and on the time it will accept the punch rather. Okay, because it's under the early start margin, and it will connect that 5 a.m. punch to the employee's schedule start. That means it will recognize that punch saying that, okay, this is connected to the schedule, still it is connected, you are connected to the schedule. However, if that employee punches 1 minute early, so 1 minute early will be what, 4:59 a.m. So that will be beyond the early start margin, because we are saying early start margin is 4 hours. Now you're coming before what we have defined. So if you come at 4:59 a.m. and go to the clock, put your card, the clock now will say, "Hey, dude, I do not know you," kind of thing, and it will tell you that, "Hey, I do not understand what your schedule is, because I can't track your schedule start time." So what the system will do is it will say unscheduled. So on your time card, the punch will be there for 59 a.m., but that will come as unscheduled, because based on the setup, you can come as early as 4 a.m., 4 hours early. But if you come earlier than that, then it will be unscheduled, and then your manager will get a notification as well, and whatever hours that you work, so that will be considered as the during the unscheduled hours. Likewise, same concept, friends, for the late start margin as well. So if you come at around 9 every day, and then you come 4 hours after that. So if it is between 9 till 4 hours from there, then it is still connected to your scheduled start time, or it will still be considered as your scheduled day. Anything after 4 hours from 9, that will be unscheduled. So if you punch at around 3 p.m., or maybe at around later than that, or 4 hours earlier than your scheduled start time, then it will be unscheduled. Okay, so that is what you will keep. Mostly the default value is 4, and you can go with that as well. You don't have to change unless you see, because it's very rare that somebody is scheduled at a certain time and they come too early. If they have to come too early, then their manager better change their schedule. So that is early start margin and late start margin. And then you have end margin. Okay, but before end margin, you see something called as missed in, right? So what is this missed in mean? So you might have guessed it. Missed in means missed punch. Well, missed punch need not be only the missed punch at the start of the shift. So if you're scheduled to come at 9, yes, you could miss to punch in, but you could also forget to punch in after your meal break. So you took a break and you returned from your meal break, but you missed rather, let's say, you missed to punch in back. And if I put an end margin here, okay, if I put an end margin here, which is the default value, by the way, so the value is 1 hour. So what it would mean that if you have forgotten to, let's say, punch in for that day at the start of the shift, and the end margin is 1. So let's say you are doing 9 to 6 p.m. So the end margin will check 6 p.m. So it will check before 1 hour from the schedule end, and after 1 hour from the schedule end. So if your schedule end time is 6 p.m., so 1 hour before that, which is 5 p.m., and 1 hour after that, which is 7 p.m. So if your punch falls uh, from 5 to 6 or 6 to 7, it will consider that as the out punch, and then for your in punch for that day, it will come as a red error, as you might have seen red, complete red cell. So you will see the missed in punch error. So that is what it does. End margin, if you put 1 hour, so from your end time, it will see 1 hour, and if the punch is falling at that time, then it will create that error, exception rather, which is missed in punch. And then those are the three fields that you will have to mostly the default values, but you will see. And then right here you have the missed out one. So what missed out means is you punched in, let's say at 9 a.m., but this time you missed to punch out. You were supposed to punch out at 6 p.m. Okay, so now at around 6 p.m. you left the office, but for some reason you had something in your mind, you forgot to punch out. Okay, it happens. It happens, right? It happened. It can happen to anyone. So now, when will the system put that exception, create that exception, which is like that beautiful red cell? You know what I mean? So that red cell, when will it turn red? Okay, so that exception for the missed out will come after 16 hours and 30 minutes. Okay, so if you punched in at 9 a.m., then it will wait for 16 hours and 30 minutes, and then it will put that cell into an exception, which is red. So that is what the missed out punch means here. And then some of the employees, or rather most of the employees, will have a schedule, but there could be some employees who may not have a schedule at all, or they may be working on a day when they are not scheduled to work, for example, on a weekend, or on a day when they are not scheduled, Saturday, Sunday, uh, when they don't have any schedule. So here, if you put restrict unscheduled in punches, and if you by default, or rather if you put change the default value from no to yes, then that will absolutely not allow the employee to punch in. So it's going to restrict. So you go to the clock and you swipe your card, and there will be an error. Okay, so that's why the default value is no, so that it still allows you to go in and then punch even if it is an unscheduled day. However, if you on an unscheduled day you punched in, but if you forgot to punch out, then let's say you punched in at 9 and you didn't punch out. So unscheduled shift length by default will be 8. So if you put 8 here, means from 9 to 8, that is 5 p.m. So it will calculate your shift as 9 to 5. Okay, so 8 hours would mean if you put 4, then it will be from 9, 10, 11, 1. So it will calculate 4 hours from there, and it will calculate the shift length based on the hours that you give from the punch in time. So that is the unscheduled shift length. In case if you punched in but forgot to punch out, based on the length you define here, the system will calculate that many hours from the punched in time. So these are some of the common fields that we spoke about that you will come across. But more often than not, you can actually create this with the default values, and that is good enough as well. And then if you look at the values under simple, these are the ones that we just discussed. If you remember, the early start margin, late start margin, missed in, and then you have the missed out limit and unscheduled. So most of the things that are there in simple are pretty standard ones which can be used. So either you can use simple, or you can simply use the default one which you have in full, and give a name. And if you're working for a particular country, you can give the country code and punch interpretation or something like that, and then you can assign that in the payroll. So we're going to see how where it gets assigned on the final day of this 20 days of Kronos configuration series. So that is all, friends, for this punch interpretation rule, day number 17. Especially if your clients are having clocks, then this one will become interesting. One more thing that I would like to tell you is, if while you're doing your testing, make sure that you try to create some test cases as to see what happens if you punch in 4 hours early or 4 hours late, and then check with your client that this is how it's going to show up on the time cards, so that they don't get surprised later on when they go live. Okay, and they know if somebody comes too early, their manager better change their schedule for that day. Okay, so I hope you found this session informative. Give me a like if you think so, and also put your comments in there in the comment section. Any suggestions or any feedback or any questions for that matter, let me know in the comment section. And thanks again for watching, and see you again on day number 18, friends. Thank you.